It was New Year's Eve in St. Joseph Township, Michigan. A time for celebration, for new beginnings. The streets were quiet, lined with houses wrapped in holiday lights. Snow covered the pavement, untouched, undisturbed, until the night took a deadly turn. Inside this house, 23-year-old Marcus Caldwell had no idea that his final moments were approaching. His wife, Jasmine, had just sent him a message. A simple request. A loving wife asking her husband to grab dinner from the car. But outside, in the darkness, someone was waiting. In a matter of seconds, everything changed. Marcus Caldwell, a dedicated soldier, a father, a husband, lay bleeding on the pavement. His killer vanished without a trace. But this was no random act of violence. Who pulled the trigger? Who wanted Marcus dead? And, more importantly, why? At first glance, the answers seemed unclear. But as investigators began to piece together the final days of Marcus Caldwell's life, a far more disturbing truth emerged. A truth buried beneath carefully crafted lies, hidden conversations, and a betrayal that ran deeper than anyone could have imagined. This wasn't just a crime of opportunity. This was planned. Precise. Calculated. And the person behind it was much closer than anyone expected. The truth would reveal itself soon enough. And when it did, no one would be prepared for what they found. A husband. A father. A soldier. Gone. But this was just the beginning. Because Marcus Caldwell was never supposed to make it out alive. Stay with us as we unravel the clues and expose the secrets behind the murder of Marcus Caldwell, a case that would leave even the most hardened detectives questioning everything they thought they knew. Marcus Caldwell was the kind of man people admired. A soldier with discipline, a husband with devotion, a father with purpose. He had spent years building a future, not just for himself, but for his wife and their young son. Those who knew him described him as responsible, dependable, and driven. He had plans, ambitions. He wanted to rise through the ranks in the military, provide a good life for his family, and leave behind a legacy that his son could one day be proud of. But for all the love and loyalty he poured into his marriage, there was something he didn't see coming. While he was focused on securing their future, the person closest to him was busy tearing it apart from the inside. Jasmine Caldwell was the picture of a supportive military wife. To the outside world, she had it all, a stable home, a strong husband, a child to raise. But inside, she wasn't satisfied. She was young, restless, and drawn to excitement. What started as boredom turned into something far more dangerous. Jasmine wasn't just unhappy, she was looking for a way out. And in that search, she found someone willing to give her exactly what she wanted. Darnell King was a soldier stationed with Marcus. He was charming, confident, and knew how to say the right things. Unlike Marcus, Darnell didn't care about discipline or structure. He lived for the moment, for the thrill. And when he crossed paths with Jasmine, that thrill turned into something intoxicating. What started as casual flirtation quickly grew into secret meetings, whispered conversations, and a relationship built on desire and deception. The three of them, Marcus, Jasmine, and Darnell, were connected by the military, by circumstance. But beneath the surface, there was an imbalance. Marcus was fighting to build something. Jasmine was looking for an escape. And Darnell? He was ready to take what didn't belong to him, no matter the cost. All of this was unfolding in St. Joseph Township, Michigan. A quiet place, a place where families settled, where life was supposed to be simple. No one could have guessed that within its peaceful streets, a deadly plan was already in motion. Before we go any further, don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? It was supposed to be just another quiet night. The kind of night where families gather to celebrate the end of a year and the start of another. But for one family in St. Joseph Township, this night would mark the end of something much more permanent. Marcus Caldwell's father had been inside the house when he heard the gunshots. The sound was sudden, sharp, and final. He rushed to the front door, stepping into the cold air, his breath visible as he looked around in confusion. And then he saw it, his son, lying motionless on the pavement, just feet away from his car. The food Marcus had gone to retrieve was still inside, untouched. His father called out to him, his voice cracking with panic. No response. My son's been shot. He's not moving, please send help. The 911 call was frantic. Desperate. The voice on the other end tried to keep him calm, instructing him to check for signs of life. He pressed his hands against his son's chest, feeling the warmth quickly fading. He pleaded for Marcus to hold on, but deep down, he knew. By the time the paramedics arrived, there was nothing they could do. The gunshots had done their damage. Marcus Caldwell was gone. As the flashing lights filled the street, officers began their work. They scanned the area, looking for clues. Who would want to kill a soldier, a family man, someone who had dedicated his life to service? There was no sign of forced entry. No struggle. His wallet was still in his pocket. His car keys were on the ground. Nothing had been taken. This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't random. This was something else. As the crime scene tape went up and detectives arrived, one question became clear: who would want Marcus Caldwell dead? And why? The answers would come soon enough. But they wouldn't be easy to hear. Marcus Caldwell had always been a man of purpose. From a young age, he had a clear vision of the life he wanted to build. The military gave him structure, discipline, and a sense of pride. He wasn't just serving his country, he was securing a future for his family. His fellow soldiers respected him, his superiors trusted him, and at home, he played the role of a devoted husband and father. He had worked for everything he had, and he never took any of it for granted. But in the quiet moments, behind closed doors, Marcus wasn't aware that his greatest battle wasn't on foreign soil, it was in his own home. Jasmine Caldwell had once been the kind of woman who seemed to fit perfectly into the role of a military wife. She smiled at the right moments, spoke with pride about her husband, and played the part well. But as time passed, the novelty of it all began to wear off. The structure that Marcus valued so much felt suffocating to her. She was young, beautiful, and felt like she was missing out on something more exciting. Her days were predictable, her nights were lonely, and in the silence, resentment grew. That's when she met Darnell King. Darnell wasn't like Marcus. He wasn't weighed down by responsibility. He lived for the moment, said what he wanted, and did what he pleased. He was stationed with Marcus overseas, and from the moment Jasmine met him, something shifted. What started as harmless conversation quickly turned into something else. Darnell had a way of making her feel seen, important, and, most of all, desired. He knew exactly what to say, how to make her laugh, how to remind her of what she thought she was missing. For the first time in a long time, Jasmine felt alive. But feelings like that come with consequences. And this one would be deadly. At first, it was just stolen moments. A glance held too long, a conversation that didn't end when it should have. But soon, it became more. Jasmine and Darnell weren't just flirting anymore, they were crossing lines. And once a line like that is crossed, it's hard to turn back. When Marcus was away for military training, Jasmine and Darnell found ways to be together. They met in hotels, and places where no one would recognize them. They texted constantly, but even that felt risky. That's when they turned to Snapchat. Messages disappeared after being read. No history, no proof. It felt safe. Private. But secrets like these don't stay hidden forever. With every meeting, Jasmine grew colder toward Marcus. The man she had once loved now felt like an obstacle. Every time she was with him, she was thinking about Darnell. Every time Marcus spoke about their future, Jasmine imagined one without him. Resentment turned into frustration. Frustration turned into hatred. And hatred turned into something far worse. Then, there was the money. Marcus had been responsible his whole life. He had a plan for everything, including what would happen if something ever happened to him. As a soldier, he had a $400,000 life insurance policy. If he died, Jasmine wouldn't just be free, she'd be rich. She wouldn't have to sneak around anymore. She wouldn't have to live in secrecy. She could be with Darnell, openly. She could start over. "We could do this," she told him one night. "And no one would ever know." At first, it was just talk. A fantasy. But the more they spoke about it, the more real it became. They knew Marcus's schedule. They knew his habits. They knew how to make it look like something it wasn't. And with Snapchat, there was no record of their conversations. No paper trail. No way for anyone to connect the dots. "We need to be careful," Darnell messaged. "He can't see this coming." And he wouldn't. Not until it was too late. The plan was simple. Jasmine would do what she always did, act like a loving wife. She would laugh at Marcus's jokes, kiss him goodbye, and make sure he never suspected a thing. Because if he saw it coming, everything would fall apart. She had one job. Lure him outside. It was New Year's Eve. Marcus had spent most of the day with his father, his wife, and their young son, enjoying his time off before he had to return to duty. It was cold, but he didn't mind. It was rare for him to slow down, to be home. He had no idea it would be his last night alive. Jasmine waited until it was late before proceeding with her plan to lure him outside. "Hey, can you grab the food from the car?" Marcus, being the man he was, didn't question it. He didn't hesitate. He just got up, stepped outside, and walked toward his car. He never saw the figure watching him from the shadows. Never heard the footsteps moving closer. He reached for the door handle, and that's when it happened. 3 shots. One after another. Fast. Precise. Deadly. Marcus dropped to the ground, blood spreading across the pavement. His body twitched for a moment, then went still. The hooded figure didn't stop to check. He turned and disappeared into the night, his breath heavy, his pulse racing. He thought he had done it. Thought he had gotten away with it. Marcus's father heard the gunshot and ran out to his son in a pool of his own blood. He cried out in disbelief, asking for help, and proceeded to call 911 for help. Something happened. "Marcus, he's been shot." His cries filled the air. The panic in his voice, the gasps between words, the way he kept repeating his name. When officers arrived at the scene, they saw what looked like a targeted hit. Marcus Caldwell lay motionless on the pavement, the snow beneath him stained deep red. His wallet was still in his pocket. His phone was untouched. His car keys rested beside him. Nothing was stolen. This wasn't a robbery. Whoever had pulled the trigger hadn't been after money or possessions. They had been after Marcus. The initial interviews began immediately. First his father, who had reported the crime, and next, Jasmine. She was the grieving widow, the devastated wife who had just lost the father of her child. Her tears came at the right moments. Her voice broke when she talked about Marcus. But something about it felt practiced. The detectives had seen grief before. Real grief. And this felt different. There were inconsistencies in her statements. She repeated details word for word, as if rehearsed. When asked what Marcus had been doing before the shooting, she stumbled, correcting herself mid-sentence. But the biggest red flag was her demeanor. She wasn't asking the right questions. She never once demanded to know who did this or why. She wasn't desperate for answers. It was as if she already knew them. As the investigation continued, a forensic team examined Marcus's wounds. The placement of the shots was precise: chest, stomach, head. Whoever had done this wasn't just trying to scare him. They wanted to make sure he didn't survive. That meant planning. That meant intention. And intention meant that someone had been waiting for this moment. Detectives started retracing Marcus's last steps. Security cameras from nearby homes were checked, but the darkness of the night provided little to no visibility of the shooter. They pulled phone records, looking for anything that stood out. And then, they came across something unusual. Snapchat messages. Sent late at night. Frequent. Between Jasmine Caldwell and an unknown number. A number that was later traced back to another soldier. Darnell King. At first, it didn't seem like much. A few deleted conversations. Some messages that had vanished after being read. But forensic analysts knew better. Nothing truly disappears. And as they dug deeper, they uncovered exactly what they were looking for. Explicit discussions. Plans. Logistics. Conversations about where Marcus would be, how the night would play out, and the assurance that it would be quick. Jasmine wasn't just aware of what was happening. She had helped set it in motion. The evidence was mounting. And soon, there would be no way out for Jasmine Caldwell and Darnell King. With the evidence stacking up, detectives moved quickly. They had what they needed, and they knew exactly where to start. The first arrest came in the early morning hours, Darnell King. He was picked up at his base, caught off guard, with no warning. He didn't resist, but his face said it all. He knew why they were there. At the station, he sat across from the detectives, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. At first, he didn't say much. He asked for a lawyer. He insisted he had nothing to do with it. But detectives had been down this road before. They let him sit with the silence. Let the weight of the situation settle in. Then, they laid out the evidence. The Snapchat messages. The phone records. The forensic analysis that confirmed Marcus had been executed with precision, not in a random act of violence. They told him they already knew the truth. It was only a matter of who would talk first. And Darnell cracked. "It wasn't my idea," he finally said, his voice low. "It was Jasmine. She set the whole thing up." He told them everything. How the affair started. How Jasmine had grown tired of Marcus. How she had convinced him that the only way they could be together was if Marcus was gone. He explained how they had used Snapchat to plan every detail, believing the messages would disappear. How Jasmine had been the one to send Marcus outside that night. And how he, Darnell, had pulled the trigger. The confession was enough. But detectives weren't done yet. They still needed Jasmine. Hours later, Jasmine Caldwell was brought in. She played her role well at first, the devastated widow, confused and overwhelmed. She asked why she was there, why they were treating her like a suspect. But then, they showed her what they had. The messages. The testimony. The plan in her own words. For a moment, she held her composure. But then, something shifted. The confidence faded. The cracks began to show. She tried to deflect, tried to twist the narrative. "Darnell's lying," she said. "He was obsessed with me. He was the one who wanted Marcus dead. I didn't have a choice." But detectives weren't buying it. They had too much. And for the first time, Jasmine Caldwell realized she had no way out. The trial of Jasmine Caldwell and Darnell King drew intense attention. A soldier murdered in cold blood. His wife accused of orchestrating it. His fellow servicemen accused of carrying it out. It was a case built on betrayal, greed, and deception. And in the courtroom, the full extent of their actions would be laid bare. The prosecution wasted no time. They presented the jury with the strongest evidence first, the deleted Snapchat messages that forensic analysts had recovered. There, in black and white, was the plan. Jasmine's instructions. Darnell's responses. The details of the setup. The promise that once it was done, they would be together. The jury read every word. Then came the forensic evidence. The ballistics report confirmed what detectives already knew: Marcus had been ambushed. The angle of the gunshots, the precision, the lack of struggle. It all pointed to a planned execution. Not an accident. Not a crime of passion. A decision made long before the trigger was pulled. And then, the prosecution's most damning witness, Darnell King himself. He had already confessed. He had already told detectives everything. Now, in front of the jury, he repeated it. How Jasmine had convinced him that Marcus was in the way. How she had reassured him that this was the only way. How she had sent the text that lured Marcus outside, knowing exactly what would happen next. She told me it was simple, Darnell said. Do it. Get rid of him. And we'll be together. The courtroom was silent as he spoke. No one moved. No one looked away. Then, it was Jasmine's turn to defend herself. Her lawyers argued that she had been manipulated. That Darnell had been obsessed with her. That he had twisted her words, forced her into a situation she never wanted. But there was one problem. Her own messages told a different story. Her words, her instructions, her plans, they were all there. The jury didn't have to guess. They didn't have to wonder who was telling the truth. They had already seen it for themselves. As the trial neared its end, Jasmine sat still, expression unreadable. She had lied. She had planned. She had convinced herself that she would get away with it. But now, with the verdict looming, she had no control left. The jury deliberated for only a few hours. The evidence was overwhelming, the betrayal undeniable. When they returned to the courtroom, there was no hesitation in their voices. The foreman stood, cleared his throat, and read the verdict. On the charge of first-degree murder, we find the defendant, Jasmine Caldwell, guilty. She didn't react. No outburst, no plea for mercy. Just silence. The weight of reality settling in. Then came Darnell King's fate. He had cooperated. He had confessed. And in exchange for his testimony, he avoided the death penalty. But his sentence was just as damning. On the charge of second-degree murder, we find the defendant, Darnell King, guilty. Jasmine Caldwell was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Darnell King, though spared from life behind bars, was given 65 years. A deal that allowed him the possibility of freedom one day. But that day would be far beyond his youth, far beyond any life he had imagined for himself when he pulled that trigger. As the judge handed down the sentences, Marcus Caldwell's family sat quietly in the courtroom. They had already lost their son. Nothing could bring him back. But now, the people responsible for taking his life were losing theirs, too. Not in the same way, not in an instant, but slowly, over the course of decades. Trapped in a place where freedom was nothing but a memory. For Jasmine, the woman who once thought she had everything figured out, there was no escape. No money, no lover, no new life waiting for her on the other side. Only a prison cell. Only time. And all the time in the world to remember how it all went so terribly wrong. Even behind bars, Jasmine Caldwell didn't seem to grasp the weight of what she had done. While most inmates serving life sentences showed some level of regret, whether real or not, Jasmine showed nothing. No tears. No remorse. No second-guessing. Guards who observed her noted that she adjusted quickly to prison life. She wasn't withdrawn. She wasn't broken. If anything, she seemed comfortable. And it wasn't long before she started seeking out attention again. Within months of her sentencing, rumors spread through the facility. Jasmine had started getting close to another inmate. A woman serving time for armed robbery. She was younger, impressionable. And just like before, Jasmine knew exactly what to say. She laughed at her jokes, leaned in a little closer when she spoke. She had done this before. And she was doing it again. One of the detectives who had worked on the case visited the prison out of curiosity. He wanted to see if she had changed, if she understood what she had done. He asked her directly, "Do you ever think about Marcus? About what you did?" Jasmine smirked. Not a single second of hesitation. "People die every day," she said. "It is what it is." But that wasn't the part that shook him. It was what she said next. Darnell was weak, she muttered. He started getting scared. If I had to, I would have killed him too. It was never about love. It was never about Darnell. He was just a tool to her, just like Marcus had been an obstacle. She would have done whatever it took to get what she wanted. And if things had played out differently, there might have been another body in the ground. For the detectives who had pieced the case together, this was the final revelation. Jasmine Caldwell hadn't made a mistake. She hadn't been manipulated. She had known exactly what she was doing from the beginning. And she would have done it again if she had the chance. Marcus Caldwell had spent his life serving his country, believing in loyalty, honor, and duty. He had built a future from the ground up, a future he thought would be shared with the woman he had vowed to love and protect. But in the end, the greatest threat to his life didn't come from war or the battlefield. It came from his own home. His house remained unchanged. His belongings still in place. His military uniform still neatly folded, untouched since the last time he wore it. But he would never walk through that door again. Never hold his son. Never see the future he had worked so hard for. Instead, his name was now spoken in the past tense. A life cut short, not by an enemy in combat, but by the person who had once promised to stand beside him. Jasmine Caldwell had played the role of a grieving widow, had pretended to be the victim, but the truth had unraveled. And when it did, it revealed the cold reality: Marcus had been nothing more than a stepping stone to the life she really wanted. Darnell King, the man who pulled the trigger, would spend most of his life behind bars. But Jasmine? She would never see freedom again. The woman who thought she had outsmarted everyone, who believed she could manipulate her way to the life she desired, was now trapped in a prison of her own making. In the end, the plan she had so carefully constructed had failed. And the love she had promised to Darnell? It had never been real. Because to Jasmine Caldwell, people were disposable, replaceable. And when they no longer served her purpose, they were simply removed. Marcus Caldwell survived deployments, military training, and years of sacrifice in service to his country. But what he didn't survive was the person he trusted most. Some betrayals are worse than death. Because some betrayals come with a smile, a kiss, and a promise of forever. And by the time the truth is revealed, it's already too late. If you found this case shocking, don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the darkest crimes. Let us know in the comments, what are your thoughts on this case? Do you think justice was served? And if you haven't already, share this video with others who follow true crime stories just like this one. And if you're looking for another shocking crime, watch the suggested video on your screen now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.